What you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Well, good morning. You're watching and listening to GB News. This is Saturday morning with Esther and Phil, and we've got a cracking show lined up for you today.
We'll be joined in the studio by a Conservative leadership hopeful following the first televised debate last night.
We'll be discussing the upcoming heatwave after a national emergency was declared, with temperatures potentially hitting 40 degrees at the start of next week.
And with Love Island currently airing its 8th season, we're asking if enough is being done for the welfare of reality TV stars.
All of that, plus much more, after the latest news headlines with Tamsin.
Esther, thank you. Good morning from the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 10. The 5 remaining Conservative leader candidates have clashed over tax cuts and the economy in the first of 3 live television debates. The former Chancellor Rishi Sunak defended his economic policies while in number 11 as he clashed with the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss over what he called her fairy tale plans. Kemi Badenoch, the Equalities Minister, and Penny Mordaunt, the International Trans Secretary, came to blows over trans issues, while the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Tom Tugendhat, said trust in the Tory party has been collapsing. The government says the Cabinet Office is to chair a COBRA meeting to discuss the impending heatwave. It says the Met Office warns people's lives could be at risk as a new record temperature in the UK could be set next week. It's issued its first red extreme heat warning, the highest alert for parts of England, on Monday and Tuesday. The NHS is warning the heat wave will be a nightmare for patients and staff. The UK Health Security Agency has increased its heat health warning to a national emergency. Tuesday is expected to be the hottest day, possibly reaching a record-breaking 40 degrees. Don Hammond, meteorologist and weather forecaster, says for most people, there'll be nowhere to escape from the heat.
Places, on Monday night could not fall below 25 degrees. That's going to smash all known records. So, this one is going to mean business. This one is going to leave quite an impact. And this one, I'm afraid, will cause hundreds, if not thousands, of excess deaths.
The Russian ambassador has arrived at government offices in London following the death of a British aid volunteer in Ukraine. The Foreign Office is urging Russia to clarify what happened with Paul Ure, demanding Moscow obey the rules of international humanitarian law. Sri Lanka's parliament is due to start the process of electing a new president after months of protests in the country over an economic crisis. President Rajapaksa's resignation was accepted after he fled to Singapore to escape protesters who'd stormed his home and offices. The Prime Minister of the country, who's also faced calls to resign, is standing in until a new president is elected, expected to be within a week. It's as a shipment of fuel has arrived to provide some relief to the crisis-hit nation. A 5% planned pay rise for millions of public sector workers is insufficient and not remotely acceptable for nurses. That's according to the Royal College of Nursing, who previously suggested a wage increase of 5% above the level of inflation, which is 11%. It says the government must give nurses an immediate substantial pay rise, saying their work and current personal hardship warrants better. In the Women's Euro 2022, the Lionesses will go into the last 8, having won their first 3 games and not conceded a single goal. England beat Northern Ireland 5-0 last night in the Group A match in Southampton. The team will face the runners-up from Group B, either Spain or Denmark, in the quarter-finals. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Welcome back. We will be going to our regular paper review next, but first, 5 Conservative leadership candidates took part in a live TV debate last night. In case you missed it, here is a little flavour of what happened.
We are facing a cost of living crisis. Families are struggling.
But borrowing your way out of inflation isn't a plan, it's a fairy tale.
I think it is wrong to put taxes up because that is what we're talking about.
I took through a consultation looking at the Gender Recognition Act. I've never been in favour of self-ID. I would have made the system much better, but I would not have divorced it from healthcare.
Because when I took over as Equalities Minister in 2020, the policy that was being pushed was self-ID. So I don't understand how that would have changed unless someone else did it.
Tom Tugendhat, is Boris Johnson an honest man?
Well done.
Well, fresh from that televised debate last night, we're delighted to say we're joined by Tom Tugendhat, who was judged by a poll from Opinion to have come out on top against the other 4 hopefuls. So fresh from that TV studio, still got his makeup on, but you were the rank outsider, but it seems to be you're coming up on the inside. Why do you think that is?
Well, Esther, it's really up to you. I mean, I take my example from you two. You've always been extremely frank and honest, and that's one of the reasons why your viewers love listening to you and watching your show, and I'm trying to do the same thing.
So, honesty?
Well, I think we've got to be frank with people, don't you? I mean, I think, you know, there's been too much beating around the bush in many areas, and I think just being absolutely frank with where we see the situation is what our job is, right? I mean, we're here to be absolutely clear with people and then to offer leadership and to offer the solutions to fix the problems that we face.
You were judged the winner of last night's contest when the opinion poll came out straight afterwards. How do you think the other 4 candidates performed?
You know, in different ways, I thought rather well, actually. I thought Rishi was all over the detail. I thought Kemi made her points extremely clearly. I thought it was perfectly clear that Penny knew what she was on about and was explaining her policies and her issues well. And Liz made a very good case for why she was so important in government for the last 10 years. I think, you know, frankly, I think that demonstrates a huge depth of talent in the Conservative Party and why Keir Starmer should be very worried.
Do you think the debates clearly had an impact on the viewers? Do you think they have any impact on Conservative MPs?
Well, you can tell me that. I don't know. It's up to you, Philip.
Well, you'll have been speaking to your colleagues. You know, we speak to a few. You'll have been speaking to them all. So, I mean, do you think were people waiting? Did people say to you, "We want to see how the debates go, and we might look again how we vote"? I mean, on that basis,
you and I both know that we know each other rather well from before. I mean, we've been friends for what, 7 years now, something like that, 8 years. I mean, we know each other pretty well, and you know, it's certainly true that we judge each other a little bit off how we think somebody's going to be able to win an election and champion a cause. Of course we do. But we also know each other pretty well, right? I mean, you know what I'm like, right? I mean, you've known me for a number of years, so I think there'll be a little bit of movement.
So you try to say nobody called you up and said, we're definitely going to be voting for you next week. And
that's one or two. One or two may have said, may have been very nice, but, you know.
Now, people will have said, it seems a bit light on policy. This person's coming in as the Prime Minister. Is there any policies you'd like to announce now?
Well, you know what I'm championing. I'm championing policing, and one of the things I'm championing is fraud and crime, cybercrime. But I have to say, I've just been looking with Philip. Forgive me, am I allowed to?
You go for it.
Well, I've just been looking at this Rochdale grooming gang thing, and I have to say, what with Telford going on today and that story going on now, it's absolutely outrageous. It is completely disgraceful. And what we've got to do is we've got to call out this horrific crime going on in our midst, and we've got to be absolutely clear about what's going on.
Now, obviously, the person who finished that was bottom at the last time, sometimes their vote gets squeezed and they get pressure to stand down and all the rest of it. Can you guarantee that when we come to vote on Monday at 5 o'clock, your name will definitely be on the ballot paper and you won't have...
You'll see my name there, Philip. Whether or not you choose to tick it will be up to you, but you'll see my name there. And because I've been always really clear about this. We've always believed, the three of us have always believed, that politics is public service, right? I mean, that's why we're here. That's what we're doing it for. We're here to champion ideas, to defend our communities, to defend Britain, to champion conservative values, and to make sure Labour's incredibly negative brand of socialism never gets anywhere near government. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing exactly that. I will put my name forward again on Monday. It'll be up to you two and 350, what is it? 355
in total, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So 355, given the three of us. I know who I'm voting for. In case you're wondering.
Well, you say that. We all wish you well. But if you did drop out, have you decided who you would support?
I haven't.
In the later rounds of the contest.
No, I haven't made that decision yet, and I haven't made that decision because I've got really good friends who are running. Kemi is a personal friend. I mean, a really close personal friend. I think she's an amazing woman. Rishi and I were elected on the same day, and we've been good mates since we were elected. Liz and I have worked together on foreign affairs now for about a year, and I respect her very, very highly. And Penny has been an amazing Royal Naval Reservist, and I've just switched from the Army to the Royal Naval Reserve. I owe her a little bit of loyalty there too. So each of them has huge.
It all sounds very cosy, doesn't it? It all sounds. Yeah, but in a way, you're still competing against each other. So obviously, you're very cosy. But what is your differential then? Why are you different from all the others? And why would you say vote for me? Because at the moment, it just seems like you're all going to be leading the country together.
Yes, the reason I'm asking for it is because I think the good people of Tatton and Shipley are going to be looking at us in whenever it is 2 years' time, and they're going to be asking, what have you done for us? What have you brought to us? And what are you going to change? And we've been through a really difficult time. You don't need me to tell you this. You keep talking about it here on your show. You have seen that, high streets, this is your campaign, high streets are struggling. We've seen that in many places in the UK, people feel left behind, and Levelling Up hasn't delivered as much as it should. And so what we need to do is we need to demonstrate that every now and again you need a clean start, and what you do is you restart from that position. And I think it is.
So your first couple of days in office, because we know what's happening, and I know obviously the campaigns have run. Your first couple of days in office, what are you going to do? What's your first thing? You're sitting at your desk. First thing you're going to do?
Well, the first thing to do is to drop the national insurance rise. As you know, we didn't vote for it. I think I'm right in saying the three of us didn't vote for it. There weren't that many people in our lobby. I think we remember that. But
we're used to that, Tom.
We've been together a few more times than I would have thought when I first got elected, but we have been together a few more times. So look, the national insurance rise has got to go.
So that's number one. That's what you'll do. Number one.
Right. The second one has got to be we've got to bring down fuel. So I've spoken about 10 pence off fuel on the fuel duty, because that is not just a tax on people travelling. It's actually a tax on jobs. It's a tax on resupplying shops. It's a tax on deliveries. It's a tax on, it's a tax on everybody, right? So what we've got to do is we've got to make that easier to deal with and, knock off some of the cost. And then, of course, what I'm going to be talking about is a new deal for Britain. Now, this is going to take a bit of work, so this is not going to be announced on day one, but it's going to be started on day one, because we really need that new deal for Britain to do Levelling Up, to fix high streets, to actually invest in communities around the country. Not just the north of England, by the way. This isn't just the Northern Powerhouse. I know I'm speaking to two Northern MPs, but you'll forgive me. There are places in the rest of the country that are left behind as well. And the other thing is A&E targets. Look, A&E and referral target at 4 hours. We need to get it back. It's been since 2015, since when I was elected, since we hit it. We need to get it back. We need to make sure it delivers, because it's about making sure people are safe at home, people are able to see their doctors on time and in the right way that they need.
So you were pretty scathing about Boris Johnson last night and his honesty. But am I right in thinking, from what you've said, that you would be sticking fairly closely to the 2019 manifesto?
Yes.
On which Boris Johnson was elected?
Yes, you are. You are right in that. That's exactly what I do. And by the way, some of the other things I'd be sticking to and making sure we delivered is Brexit, because what Boris has done is he's got most of Brexit done. Let's be honest, there's Northern Ireland still, and that's a really big issue. Let's not kid ourselves that that's going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. So we're going to need to do two things. The first thing is we've got to pass the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, which we've all supported. The next thing we've got to do is we've got to make sure that we change the way these negotiations are done. Now, the Europeans have been messing around with us here. They played for time with Theresa, and they basically kicked it in the long grass with Boris, pointing fingers at him. What we need to do is point the finger back at them. Do you know that they treated East Germany, when it was part of the Soviet bloc, better than they treat Northern Ireland now? Now, you're not going to tell me honestly that the standards of food or welfare in the Soviet bloc were better than they are in the UK today. We were in the EU 6 years ago. Come on, this is ridiculous. So we need to reset this debate. We need to actually be starting to make this argument in Germany, in France, in Italy, all over the place. Because people in Europe agree with us. People in Europe want to work with us. What we've got a problem with is Brussels.
Now, I see in the papers some of the commentators are sort of to be like they're agitating for a general election. Would you be going for a general election, or would you be waiting until 2024?
Look, not until we're ready, and I don't think we would be ready until 2024.
I don't think, or we won't be?
I would be astonished, absolutely astonished. I mean...
But you wouldn't crumble to the demands of some of the media wanting a general election?
No. Look, forgive me, Esther and Philip, you were both elected on the same mandate as I was to serve the communities in Tatton and Shipley and me in Tunbridge on a 5-year mandate. That's what we were elected to do. We weren't elected to play politics with those election timetables. What we were elected to do was to deliver, and that's what we're going to do. So when I'm the leader, let's be positive, when I'm leading this great party and as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, there is absolutely no need to go for an early election. What there is a need to do is to deliver. And that's why we need a clean start and actually return the government to serving our people.
Who's your team? Have you got your team?
I'm looking at them.
Thank you. Oh, see how he's winning. See, he wants those votes. Do you see what he's doing?
I know, but by gaining our 2 votes, he's lost a load of others if he's thinking about if he's thinking of involving me. But I take it what you said, you'd be happy to serve in the cabinet of any of the other remaining candidates in the contest.
I mean, I think there are some fantastic people who are running, and I think there are some fantastic people who could really make a huge presence felt in cabinet now. I think there are some really impressive people in our party. And I think, frankly, Labour have been letting us down. I mean, you just spoke about Rochdale, Telford, again, that's a Labour council for, 40-odd years? Labour are letting us down. The SNP are failing in hospitals and schools in Scotland. The Lib Dems, God knows where they are. They're all over the place. We need a Conservative government. We need a Conservative victory in 2024. I think I'm best placed to deliver it.
And I've lost my bet because I said that we're going to do an interview without you mentioning that you were in the army, and you did actually mention it when you referred to Penny Mordaunt.
Oh, no, I said
I've literally lost my
I said I wouldn't do that.
But I've won the bet, so I'm happy. You've lost his vote, you might have got mine, because I won the bet.
Anyway, the best of luck on Monday. We wish you all the very best, and thank you for joining us, Tom.
It's a great pleasure to see you both.
We appreciate it.
Well, now it's time to look at some of the biggest stories from the week, and we're joined by public affairs consultant Katie Frank. So, Katie, thanks for joining us today. We moved the show around a little bit so that you could obviously hear what Tom had to say as well, but your stories from the week?
Yeah, so stories from the week. I mean, how can we not talk about, first of all, the leadership contest, but maybe back to a bit of celebrity culture. We've got these fantastic celebrities here in front of us, potentially, but another candidate potentially threw her hat into the ring. A non-Conservative Gemma Collins said, if Penny can do it, why can I not do it? A bit of Towie stardom there. I'm not sure what her policies would be, whether it's swimsuits in a diving
So do you think the way it has been run and delivered, as we're all watching so many reality shows, do you think it has been a bit reality show-like, the way the leadership contest has been, covered?
I do, and let's face it, there's a theory of how all of this works. We're meant to have a prime minister. You're meant to elect your own constituency MP, not the prime minister. We don't live in a presidential system. But we've seen, especially since Margaret Thatcher, since Blair, will maybe rule Gordon Brown out of PR stardom. But since then, people have voted for this person, this personality, and I don't think we can get away from that. And I think that some of the candidates do lack a bit of that sparkle that the likes of David Cameron had. It wasn't just that you knew what his policies were going to be and you could kind of predict what it was going to be, and that he was honest with the people. We're in a tough situation. We can't have our cake and eat it. We have to fix it. But he also was a likeable person, even though he came from a certain background. He managed to get a majority votes and pull the Conservative Party out of the doldrums. And I think that's been forgotten. Whilst Rishi Sunak may be saying, these are hard times, we can't always do this, he does come across as a bit arrogant, almost. And that potentially is something that could put voters off. Now, whilst he's saying the right things, I think some of their PR campaigns need to be a bit slicker.
Says a PR lady. But I think that, we do live in the television age. the media age. So you do have to have that charisma. It's not just what you're going to read in print.
Did you think Tom won the debate last night?
I think Tom said the right things, and I think that a lot of them did. I think where we have an embarrassing level of talent in the Conservative Party, it's a shame the opposition can't really put across the same level. But he certainly came across as a leader who could be potentially strong on the international stage. But would his domestic policies also play well? And can he speak to your average voter, your voters who not just can't fill up their cars, but who, the ones who can't even afford cars, etc. Those heartlands that we won in the previous general election, your so-called red wall, how can we turn that into a blue wall? But he also does have that appeal to the southern voters too.
Philip always thought that this leadership contest was too short, didn't you? You felt we never really got to know the people or understand what they were putting forward. It's always sort of over in a day. Do you think in that way people have been deprived of knowing a little bit more about a lot of people, really, that people didn't know about?
I agree. I think also the media are holding back from really digging into the candidates. A lot of what we've seen about the candidates in the news has been driven by these campaigns. They hire certain firms behind them who run either very clean campaigns or sometimes dig up and choose to play dirty. And blue on blue won't help the Conservatives at the next general election.
And people have complained a lot about this, haven't they? There's been a lot of dirt dished in a day or two.
Exactly.
By saying that.
Exactly. And some of the things that anyone in the Westminster bubble has seen through WhatsApp groups, etc. It's not particularly how, if we're criticising Boris Johnson for how he's led things in the war between number 10 and number 11 that was happening and all of the leaking, the briefing against, etc., then the Conservatives need to hold themselves to a higher standard, potentially. People want grown-ups to be running the country, not schoolyard politics.
I totally agree with them, Phil.
What was your story of the week?
Oh, my story of the week, it just made me smile. It's something completely different, but I guess it is saying, what would you do to get to the top? And if we can have a look at this video clip, here it is, two mums on the playing ground, as it were. If we are going to see the video clip, I don't know, but here they are. And look what they wouldn't do. Two mums running down, 100-metre, pushes her off course there to win the race. And that's what I said, what people would do.
Terrific.
So I kind of think parents there, when they watch the kids playing football, rugby, taking part in the sort of summer fun day, would you have been one of those pulling somebody back, pushing somebody over a three-legged race? How dastardly would you be, Katie?
Well, I have to say, it reminded me a bit of Princess Diana, although I don't think she was doing that when she famously went in the school race and probably shocked the rest of the royal household. But I think that, sport is a great thing in this country. And also, I have to say, I'm not a particular football person. I'm more of a rugby person, being from Huddersfield, the home of the Rugby League.
Yes.
Fantastic West Yorkshire sport. And one of the things I like is it is, you're always taught to respect the referee. And even though, it was always shocking, it was unusual that teams and parents would get really cross and angry at each other, whereas that's more accomplished.
That race there between the two mums, that was more like a game of rugby, wasn't it?
I like having a contrary opinion to most people. I'm actually with the mum who was. I am, because we've
Is that the only way you'd win?
No, we've had all this political correctness about we shouldn't have competitive sport in schools, and there was this parent showing that competitive sport is actually a fine thing and was taking it to new lengths. So I'm all for it. And actually, one thing, my son eldest son is a referee, and the abuse that the parents give at the side of matches is absolutely. They seem to take it more seriously than the kids. But I'm with the mum. She was showing competitive sport is a good thing in schools, and more power to her elbow, literally her elbow.
Katie, we will see you back at 11 o'clock with what you've seen in today's papers. Thank you very much indeed. And your son, thankfully, is a chip off the old block, so he doesn't take the flak. He just sort of water off a duck's back. Exactly. But look, coming up after the break, we'll be joined by Attorney General Suella Braverman, who this week was knocked out of the leadership race and pledged her support to Liz Truss.
And we want to hear from you today, whether it's the race to the top in politics or in children's sports days. What would you do to win? Let us know by emailing us on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. Now, in a leadership election, there isn't just one winner, as other candidates have a chance to also impress MPs, party members and the public as they're put through their paces.
One of the candidates who certainly has impressed is Attorney General Suella Braverman, who joins us now. Hello, Suella. Here we are.
Esther. Good morning, Philip.
Right, well, what a week it's been. And we're saying you were somebody who maybe people didn't know that much about you. They certainly do now. But do you want to tell us? I mean, people say it's weeks a long time in politics, but what weeks you've had? Do you want to talk us through what that leadership contest is like?
Well, Esther, you will know you had a grueling experience as well a few years ago, but it's intense. I have no regrets about having put my name forward. I put forward a very clear policy platform, taking a tough line on immigration, in particular on the illegal migration across the Channel, really delivering faithfully and fully the Brexit promises, tax cuts and taking a firm approach to identity politics. I was really encouraged that my policy platform was judged to be the most popular out of all the candidates amongst Red Wall voters. That's why I did it. I think it was really important to encourage the debate on those issues. I think I achieved that. And I'm really, it was actually a very positive experience, even though I'm obviously disappointed that I'm not progressing further. I really enjoyed meeting colleagues. I've made some really good friends. And you're right, I think more people know about the work that I've done and what I stand for.
So, some people might not know you're a barrister, you're a QC, you specialise in immigration law. And I was interested in what you want to do with the European Court of Human Rights and how we are going to tackle once and for all illegal immigration. What would you do? Because hopefully you'll be part of a new team.
Well, you're right, Esther. I worked as a barrister for 10 years before I was an MP, and I specialised in immigration law and asylum law, and I defended the Home Office for several years in court. And I saw firsthand that we have a really difficult immigration system. We have rules that are frankly exploited. We have a lot of cases which are meritless. We have a lot of weak cases that clog up the system. And that experience, coupled with my experience as the Attorney General, where I've been working on this issue in government, which has been a priority, have led me to the conclusion that the way to finally fix the issue of small boats crossing the Channel, is to exclude the jurisdiction of the European Court of Human Rights. We saw last month how the court, a foreign judge, using quite an opaque process at the 11th hour, literally, intervened to stop us delivering upon our domestic priorities. The simple truth is the only way to stop that from happening in the future is to withdraw from the international treaty to which we're a member, that being the European Convention on Human Rights.
Suella, when you left the contest, you decided you were going to support Liz Truss. And some people might have been surprised about that, because obviously in the leadership contest, you made a big play of being a Spartan, one of the few people who voted against Theresa May's deal every single time. And yet Liz Truss voted Remain in the referendum and campaigned for Remain in the referendum. And, you know, you sort of said that, I think I saw an interview where you said you thought that Rishi and Penny were both sort of on the left of the Conservative Party. But, you know, Liz Truss spoke at the Lib Dem conference in favour of abolishing the monarchy years ago. So why is Liz Truss a sort of an ardent Brexiteer and a right-wing candidate when sort of the evidence for most people would suggest the exact opposite?
I think those points are all right in terms of Liz Truss's voting record, and I don't think she's made any attempt to deny the reality of her past views. But I think what I've been very impressed by with Liz over the last few years is the way she's really embraced Brexit. And she's not been one of these people who's been regretful or negative or pessimistic. Quite the contrary. The trade deals that she struck are a great testament to Brexit opportunities. And recently, in her work as Foreign Secretary, she's been the lead minister in delivering on the Northern Ireland Protocol. Now, I know that's quite a technical, dry issue for some people, but it's been absolutely vital if we're going to complete the Brexit process. It's been very, very difficult, frankly, in government to actually get progress and movement on this. And it's been under Liz's watch that, and I've been working with her closely on it, that we've now managed to see the introduction of a bill into Parliament. It's taken quite some time to get this far. And that bill is very robust in terms of reducing any trade border running down the Irish Sea, which causes a division between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. This is a really important Brexit issue, if you like, and she's the only candidate really who has walked the walk, so to speak, and I judge her by her actions, not her past words.
Last night, obviously, we had the first televised debate. I don't know if you saw it or not, but obviously Liz
I'm sure she did.
She wasn't judged to have done particularly well. What was your view of last night's debate?
Actually, to my mind, I thought Liz came across as the most substantive and serious person. She was able to take on the Chancellor on the debate about the economy in a far more impressive way than any of the other candidates. She was able to provide detailed solutions on the green agenda, on our foreign policy. That's all reflective of her high-level experience at the top of government. And to my mind, it's between Rishi and Liz, actually. Those two stood out to me to be the most serious politicians there. And for the reasons I've set out, I'm backing Liz.
Just in one word answer, if you can, Suella, would you be happy to serve in the cabinet of any of the remaining candidates in the contest if they won?
One word. You're limiting me to one word. I want to talk at more length, but yes, I would. They're all fantastic people at the end of the day, and I'm actually very proud of this contest because it's showcasing excellence and talent at the heart of our party.
You said yes, you know, for a politician. Then you followed up with some more words, but you got it right first time. Suella Braverman, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Yeah, and well done. You did brilliantly in the contest. I think everyone thinks you did brilliantly, so well done as well. Now, let's take a slight break from politics and talk about a show that every summer fascinates the entire country.
It is.
Almost the entire country, I guess.
It is, of course, the one and only Love Island, in which young men and women survive by coupling up, whether it be for love, friendship or money.
The show is currently airing its 8th season, but despite the enormous popularity, there have been serious questions looming about the psychological impact on contestants, following 3 suicides linked to the show.
Well, joining us now to discuss the welfare of contestants on reality shows is TV psychologist and welfare director Honey Lancaster-James. Morning. So, this show, a bit... I don't know, it started off as Love Island and it's certainly far from it with what's been happening there to the contestants.
Well, I haven't actually been watching this series. I work, along with my team on Set Welfare, we work on a number of shows around the world. And if we watched them all, we'd be watching TV constantly. But what we do is we advise production companies on how to ensure that people taking part in any kind of TV show that's of a factual nature, so it involves members of the public, if you like, whether it's reality TV or a documentary or some other kind of show. We advise production companies on how to ensure that they get the most positive experience that they can. And that is a really vital part of contributor welfare. I think in recent years, there has been an increased scrutiny for production companies to ensure that the people going onto these programmes are robustly evaluated, assessed, risk assessed before they go on. And my team and I certainly do that. But the bit I think that's really key is how to support them just through the process and also afterwards as well. So we do a lot of training for people who have come out of a high profile show on how to manage and how to cope with their social media, for example, how to potentially cope with the changes to their lives or to their lifestyles, some of their relationships. It's
Honey,
really a very complex issue.
Yeah, so would you do this show?
What, you mean go on it?
Yes.
Oh, I wouldn't actually. No, I wouldn't. That's the truth of the matter. I wouldn't go on it. I think the truth is that the kinds of people who want to go on these shows and take part in something like Love Island or any other reality show have a particular aim in mind. They often have goals for their lives. They often want to build up their social media following. They see themselves as making a career in perhaps the public eye. And some of them just want to go on and have a really good time. And they're a lot younger than me, most of the people who go on those kinds of shows. So, and that's fine. And I think we have to respect people's choices and support their choices. We're all autonomous adults. We can make choices for ourselves. But I personally, I love working in television. It's all that I do. It's my full-time career as a psychologist, as a welfare director, and I enjoy it. But I enjoy working behind the scenes. I enjoy supporting people to make sure that they get the best out of these experiences if they're going to go on.
So would you say, Honey, then you're the puppeteer rather than the puppet?
I'm absolutely not the puppeteer. I wish I was, because I'd have more control. No, we are very much advisors. We can only advise production companies on what to do. It's production companies and the commissioners, of course, behind those productions that generally call the shots as to what happens on shows. But what we're looking for and what we're hoping for is that most reputable production companies will have a welfare service, a well-resourced, a multidisciplinary service where we can advise them to make sure that they are mindful of the impacts of some of the things that go on these programs and how they can best support them, because it isn't always quite how it appears on television. There are lots of different factors that go into keeping contributors safe while they're taking part in a show and afterwards.
Honey, Jeremy Kyle's show was taken off air after one person committed suicide, took their own life. I think the show hadn't even been aired. It wasn't ever shown on TV, the show that they featured in, and yet they took their own life afterwards. And the show was taken immediately off air by ITV. I personally thought quite unfairly, to be perfectly honest. Love Island, as we said at the start, there's been 3 suicides linked to the programme, one way or another. How does Love Island keep going when Jeremy Kyle was taken off in an instant?
Well, I think they have to be really, really careful that, for a start, 2 previous contestants are known to have committed suicide. But the thing that we need to be really careful about is that we don't draw causal links just because they happen to have both been on the show. And the third that I think you're referring to is Caroline Flack, who was the presenter of the show. In all of those cases, the investigations, to the best of my knowledge anyway, did not show that it was their experience on the show that led to their difficulties with their mental health. And I think we need to be very careful that we don't sort of take 2 and 2 and make 5. I think that's really, really key. I think what happened with the Jeremy Kyle show was different, if I'm honest. And I actually did welcome the decision by ITV to take that show off air. I know it was a very popular show. It was extremely entertaining. It was extremely watchable for many people. But the fact of the matter with that, I think, was that we've moved on. You know, it was a show that had been on air for a long time, and we've moved on in our awareness as to how to support people who appear on television. And I think the very sort of nature and design of that show meant that it was very difficult to do everything that we would want to do to ensure that people are okay when they appear on television. So I do think that came to the end of its life. I think it was very sad what happened to that particular
Honey Lancaster,
that you mentioned.
Honey Lancaster James, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning to discuss Love Island. Thank you.
Now, don't go anywhere, because coming up after the break, we'll be discussing a book detailing Prince Charles and what the author describes as his long-standing love affair with alternative medicine.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to the show. Your views have been coming in thick and fast, Phil.
Yeah, Colin says, Tom did extremely well. We are looking for honesty. Kemi also came across well. As a former police officer, Tom is saying all the right things. Rock on, Tommy.
I remember that saying. Alan says, Suella is streaks ahead of the rest. And Jackie said, I declared that Suella was my choice, but sadly she's out of the race. Although I have not been able to watch every detail from all the candidates. I think that goes down to what you said. It was a bit too short, the whole of the race, as it were. Suella is the one who I have heard that could tackle this out-of-control immigration.
Well, on that subject of the speed of the race, Richard says, I agree that the early stages of this contest is far too short. I believe that my personal favourite, Suella Braverman, would have done much better with more coverage of individual policy details. She was barely mentioned in the early stages, but mark my words, Suella will be a Prime Minister in the future.
Ooh.
So lots of support for Suella coming through in your comments.
Well, we'll come back to your views because there's lots coming in, and please do keep them coming in. So keep those views coming in to us. Now, a book was published earlier this year about Prince Charles and his passion for alternative medicines.
In Charles, the Alternative Prince, Professor Edzard Ernst investigates the Prince of Wales and his so-called promotion of unproven, disproven and occasionally harmful alternative therapies.
Well, we're delighted to say that Edzard joins us now. Now, I was reading about you and I was reading about your book, as we obviously do when people come in. There seems to me, because you are a professor of alternative medicine, but there seems to me there's been a little bit of a feud going on between you and Prince Charles for quite a long time now. So do you want to tell us how this came about and how you've been doing all this research?
Well, I was professor of alternative medicine at Exeter for 20 years, and I'm retired since 10 years. And you're quite right. I had several run-ins with Prince Charles, who was promoting alternative medicine, whereas I was researching it, which is quite a different angle. And the whole thing came to breaking point when he complained that I had committed a breach of confidence, and then there was a very unpleasant investigation into that. Lasted 13 months. My own university was uniquely unsupportive, and in the end, it was decided that I hadn't breached confidence, but my whole department had dissolved, broken down, etc., etc. That is 10 years ago, and I waited 10 years for writing this book because I admit I was quite angry at what had happened. Not so much Charles, but more, I think, my own university for not defending me. I waited 10 years hoping that somebody else would write this book because I think it's an important book. And nobody did write it, so I started writing it, and now it's published.
So why is Charles such an advocate of these alternative medicines? And is it a Charles thing, or are the royal family as a whole in favour of these things?
Specifically, homeopathy has a very long history with the royal family, as long as the history of homeopathy itself. But Prince Charles is certainly the most outspoken one in favor of homeopathy, and Prince Charles is also the only one who adopts all sorts of other alternative treatments. The point that I'm trying to make in the book is that some alternative treatments are actually quite good. There's supportive evidence for them, etc., etc. But without exception, the ones that Prince Charles picks are not supported by evidence. So he has a knack of supporting dead horses, so to speak.
People might say, well, hold on a minute, look at the royal family. They seem to live to a ripe old age in the royal family. Whatever, I mean, I'm not an expert, but, just looking at it, thinking, well, whatever they're doing, it's obviously working, isn't it?
Yeah, then you might say that, unless you know that as soon as they are really ill, they take the best of conventional medicine and use that for their illness. So advocating homeopathy is a little bit like Antoinette saying, let them eat cake. It's cynical.
Does it really matter what Prince Charles thinks? I mean, I know that you're sort of taking it quite personally, but does it really matter what his view is on these things? Does anybody really listen to Prince Charles on this subject?
Well, first of all, I don't take it personally at all in the book. The book is entirely evidence-based, like all my books, and I've bent over backwards to let personal things not appear in the book. Does it matter? Yes, of course it matters if somebody of influence advocates treatments that don't work. advocates treatments that are harmful, wastes money, taxpayers' money mostly, on all of this, and undermines rational thinking. If that doesn't matter, I don't know what matters.
Edward, what would you like the result of your book to be? That Prince Charles says no more about alternative medicine? What do you want to happen from your book?
No, I just want to chronicle. It's a biography. I don't expect any sort of result. It's a biography. It is something that people can read up. It's something that is important. Something that describes the state of mind of our future king.
Professor Edward Ernst, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Thank you.
Now, a national emergency has been declared after a red extreme heat warning was issued for the first time, as temperatures could hit 40 degrees.
The Met Office's highest warning covers areas including London, Manchester and York on Monday and Tuesday. And it means that there is a risk to life and daily routines, and daily routines will need to change.
Well, join us now to discuss the extreme weather is weather forecaster John Hammond. John, obviously everybody seems to be petrified about what's going to happen on Monday and Tuesday. How serious do you believe this to be?
Very serious. In fact, more serious than I've ever seen before as a forecaster, and I've been forecasting for many decades. We may be sort of sleepwalking into this a little bit because the weather's so pleasant at the moment. You know, it's going to be up into the mid to high 20s today across much of the UK, and you know, it will be safe to go outside and sunbathe perhaps. But really, as you suggest, it's going to ramp up very rapidly through tomorrow, and particularly Monday and Tuesday, when we are expecting, and all the computer models are in agreement and very consistent, that we're going to see unprecedented heat. The all-time record is 38.7. That was made only 3 years ago. In all likelihood, we're going to break that record either on Monday or Tuesday or both. And there's every chance we will go through the 40-degree barrier, and some places could be even hotter than that. And it's not just the days either. Monday night will be unbelievably hot. Some places won't fall below the mid-20s on Monday night, again, smashing the all-time record. So it's going to have big impacts on infrastructure, on transport, potentially on energy. Schools will be closed, and my advice, if you're an employer, would be to communicate with your employees as to what your plan is, your plan of action. Should your staff stay at home? Well, how are you going to get them to work? Should they come to work? Maybe only key workers come to work. And if you're an employee, I'd be checking with your employer as to whether you should go to work. So big impacts. And of course, the NHS is going to bear the brunt with the infirm, the frail, the elderly, particularly vulnerable in this sort of heat that this country is really not used to.
Have we gone sort of a bit wimpy in this country and sort of risk averse and everything? I was looking at a weather forecast from years ago. It was in the papers this week, you know, where it had temperatures in the sort of mid-30s and whatever, and all it had was big sunny signs, and it's on for those watching on the TV. It's on the screen now on the left. You know, all it had was big sunshines and happy faces and all the rest of it. And look at the weather forecast for today. It's all red and warnings and everything.
Danger.
Exactly.
Don't go out. Stay at home. You can't work anymore.
Why has your profession gone from the happy smiley faces to the red warnings in such a scary manner?
Well, everything in moderation. We all love fine weather. We all love sunshine. But the fact that I suggest to you that hundreds, if not thousands, of excess deaths will happen early next week means perhaps we shouldn't belittle what's coming down the tracks towards us. Yeah, we all like fine weather. But as I said at the start, the sort of temperatures we're going to see on Monday and Tuesday, this country has never seen in recorded history. That is bound to take its toll. So I don't think it's scaremongering, it's just giving out warnings and preparing people for what's going to happen, and just giving sound advice, really, to stay in the shade, drink lots of fluid, to do as little exercise as you possibly can. Now, people are going to have to. Some people are going to have to go to work. Some people are going to have to get out into the sunshine.
If we just sort of, there's lots of people now going on holiday. They're deliberately choosing to go to really warm places. Are we now, with the Foreign Office, going to have to tell them, emergency, alert, don't go away, it's dangerous, whatever you do? Maybe don't swim, don't do anything that's energetic, because that's what we're saying to people in this country, but they're happy to fly to another part of the world to get those heats.
Yeah, into lovely air-conditioned hotels, Esther. This country, the vast majority of people don't live in air-conditioned homes. So, hot weather by day is fine if you can escape it at night into a nice air-conditioned hotel room. That will not be the case, of course, for us back home, where you've got excessive heat and then an excessively hot night with no air conditioning, no means of cooling down. So, yeah, some people will cope better than others. Of course, we're all different. But it is particularly the frail, the elderly, people not used to this sort of heat, who have heart conditions, for example, who are going to struggle. I mean, the good news is it's not going to last all that long. It will have cleared through by Wednesday.
I know we'll be seeing you a bit later during the weather, but thank you very much indeed for joining us now. I know he's giving us the warnings, and I get that, but I agree with you, Phil.
Well, I heard him say don't do any exercise, so it's working for me. That's certainly working for me.
Anyway, no exercise. This week, Manchester Airport's Managing Director Chris Woodruff warned passengers that he cannot promise them a great experience this summer, saying most people will fly without trouble, but there will be examples where that doesn't happen. Well, we've been seeing that already.
Staff shortages have been blamed for much of the recent disruption, and critics have accused firms of cutting too many jobs during COVID.
Well, joining us to discuss what people can expect as they gear up for their well-earned summer holidays this year is travel journalist Simon Calder. Simon, the fact that people are coming out now, chief executives of airports, and saying it's not going to be a great experience, we knew that. So how bad is it going to get?
Well, actually, I agree with Chris Woodruff, the guy from Manchester Airport, that actually most people are going to get away without too many problems. Yes, we've got really serious issues, but at two airports, and that's at British Air at Heathrow, where they are actually capping the number of flights. You might have seen there was a big argument this week between Heathrow and Emirates, because Heathrow's basically been going around telling the airlines, right, you've got to cut some flights, we can't handle all the passengers. And at the same time, at Gatwick, EasyJet continues to have problems with some last-minute cancellations, certainly last weekend, which has been pretty miserable. But if you're not flying from Heathrow or Gatwick, then the chances are your journey is going to be fairly smooth. I'm afraid I can't promise the same if you're sailing out of Dover. Huge queues at the port today for sailings to Calais and to Dunkirk. But that's entirely down to Brexit, I'm afraid, due to the requirement by the French passport control to stamp everybody's passport as we ask to be treated. So that's going to become a feature of the summer, I would say possibly even more than airport chaos.
Quickly, we've just been speaking to John Hammond about the weather on Monday and Tuesday, and I wondered what travel disruption we can expect as a result of the heat. I see that Network Rail have already said there's going to be a revised rail timetable and don't travel unless it's necessary and all this kind of stuff. Are we going to see a big problem next Monday and Tuesday with travel?
Absolutely. The message from train operators is do not travel on Monday or on Tuesday unless you absolutely have to. There's going to be blanket speed restrictions put in place. That means everything slows down and snarls up. So even if you were planning to cancel, to travel, your train might be cancelled. If you have got an advance booking for those days, pretty much every train company is saying, OK, if you're not going on Monday and Tuesday, we'll take you Wednesday or Thursday, some even longer than that. So check with your train operator. And of course, as we were just hearing, have your bottle of water, have your hat. That's what I've got, and you will be absolutely fine. But we'll just have to see how it goes. Obviously, it's going to be tricky on the roads as well. Lots of overheating, I'm afraid.
Simon Calder, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and keep drinking that water. That's it for the first hour of the show, but don't go anywhere because we've got a cracking second hour on the way.
And we want to keep hearing from you, so send us your views, send them in on email at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning and welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Philip. Coming up on this hour of the show.
Yes, we'll be joined by an economics expert to discuss inflation in the UK.
We'll also be talking about the rudest restaurant in the country where sensitive people are warned to stay away.
That plus plenty more after your latest headlines with Tamsin.
Esther, thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The Cabinet Office is to chair an emergency COBRA meeting to discuss the impending heatwave. It's as the Met Office warns people's lives could be at risk as a new record temperature in the UK could be set next week. It's issued its first red extreme heat warning, the highest alert for parts of England on Monday and Tuesday. The NHS is warning the heatwave will be a nightmare for patients and staff. The UK Health Security Agency has increased its heat health warning to a national emergency. Tuesday is expected to be the hottest day, possibly reaching a record-breaking 40 degrees. John Hammond, meteorologist and weather forecaster, says for most people, there'll be nowhere to escape from the heat.
Places, on Monday night could not fall below 25 degrees. That's going to smash all known records. So, this one is going to mean business. This one is going to leave quite an impact. And this one, I'm afraid, will cause hundreds, if not thousands, of excess deaths.
The 5 remaining Conservative leader candidates have clashed over tax cuts and the economy in the first of 3 live television debates. The former Chancellor Rishi Sunak defended his economic policies while in number 11 as he clashed with the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss over what he called her fairy tale plans. Kemi Badenoch, the Equalities Minister, and Penny Mordaunt, the International Trade Secretary, came to blows over trans issues, while the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Tom Tugendhat, said trust in the Tory party has been collapsing. Attorney General England and Wales Suella Braverman, who was knocked out of the leadership contest last week, says she has no regrets about putting her name forward.
It's actually a very positive experience, even though I'm obviously disappointed that I'm not progressing further. I really enjoyed meeting colleagues. I've made some really good friends. And you're right, I think more people know about the work that I've done and what I stand for. They're all fantastic people at the end of the day. And I'm actually very proud of this contest because it's showcasing excellence and talent at the heart of our party.
Sri Lanka's parliament is to start the process of electing a new president after months of protest in the country over an economic crisis. President Rajapaksa's resigned and fled to Singapore to escape protesters who'd stormed his home and offices. The Prime Minister of the country, who's also faced calls to resign, is standing in until a new president is elected, which is expected to be within a week. It's as a shipment of fuel has arrived to provide some relief to the crisis-hit nation. A 5% planned pay rise for millions of public sector workers is insufficient and not remotely acceptable for nurses. That's according to the Royal College of Nursing, who previously suggested a wage increase of 5% above the level of inflation, which is 11%. It says the government must give nurses an immediate substantial pay rise, saying their work and current personal hardship warrants better. In the Women's Euro 2022, the Lionesses will go into the last 8, having won their first 3 games and not conceded a single goal. England kicked Northern Ireland out of the competition last night, beating them 5-0 in the Group A match in Southampton. The team will face either Spain or Denmark in the quarter-finals. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. Back to Esther and Philip.
Welcome. That was in stereo.
That was yeah. Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Philip. We have a fantastic show lined up for you this hour on TV and radio coming up.
As the Conservative leadership race heats up, we'll be discussing the issues that means the most to millions of families, the cost of living and rising inflation.
We'll be discussing what has been described as the rudest restaurant in Britain.
And as ever, we want to hear from you this morning, so get involved with the conversation and send us your views. gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. And you have been.
Now, lots of you have been getting in touch. Esther, who...
I have. I've got one here. You're all telling us who you think should be the next Prime Minister. I've got Cornelius says, after the first debate for our next PM, Penny Mordaunt was by far the most composed and gets my vote. Liz Truss, again, gaslighting the situation in Ukraine instead of using diplomacy. She said she's a real danger. So for Cornelius, it has to be PM for PM.
Virginia disagrees with Cornelius. She says there should be no policies put through except the manifesto now. Not enough time for extras. Liz Truss will protect Brexit. The others won't. So there you go. Very mixed opinions coming through. From people. We've got loads and loads of views coming through, so please keep them coming in. We enjoy reading them. Now we're joined now by political consultant Katie Frank and GB News editor Darren McCaffrey. Darren, if we can start with you, I just wonder what you made of the interviews with Tom and Suella earlier.
Yeah, really fascinating stuff, isn't it? Because in many ways, you know, Tom is still the insurgent candidate, isn't he? And he's trying to obviously raise his profile. He is, in many ways, because most people don't know who he is, a clean, fresh start, isn't he? Someone who can genuinely claim he's not got association with this government. I think the problem for Tom is that he, you know, in terms of the practical reality of winning MPs over, has probably reached the end of the road. He will take place and part again in that TV debate tomorrow night on ITV. That will be another big moment for him. Clearly, according to the opinion polls, the Snap opinion poll, he won last night's debate, though that, of course, was among kind of ordinary voters. This contest is about MPs and Conservative members. And Suella, I mean, you know, again, there's this, you know, this really big question for the party about kind of what's it battling for and trying to unite on the right of the party. And Suella's obviously kind of rode in behind Liz Truss, hasn't she, during this campaign. The question is, again, can Liz Truss capitalise on that going forward? But there is little doubt now that we've got essentially 3 front-runners, probably, I would suggest. And last night, in terms of the TV debate performance, really fascinating to watch in the sense that I think Penny Mordaunt probably played it a little bit too safe, actually, in the sense that she didn't quite wow as much as the momentum of her campaign would suggest you would. Rishi Sunak probably played it quite well in terms of dominating the debate on some kind of key territories, such as the economy and taxation, which he's obviously very well versed in. Liz, probably a bit less so in terms of her performance. But what's fascinating is that massive, and it is pretty big, divide now on taxation and on the economy. I mean, there is a real battle within the Conservative Party about this. And I know people suggest that, You know, you look at the Conservatives sometimes and there's not kind of fresh new policy and feels a bit tired sometimes. That's what the critics would suggest. I would say, actually, you know, there is a real divide line in the Conservative Party about what the future is in terms of the economy, the cost of living crisis at a really difficult time. And that battle's going to play out. That's going to be probably the decisive thing in who ultimately becomes the Conservative leader.
Who's your prediction, by the way? Who's going to win? Who's going to win this? Come on. You're the expert.
Honestly,
Darren.
I'm not. Well, even if I was, and I'm not entirely sure I am, it's impossible. And you guys know this. It's impossible to predict these things. I mean,
everybody will be forgotten by tomorrow. Give us a name. Come on, Darren, give us a name.
We'll definitely win the final
Okay.
two.
Well,
whether he wins, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of Conservative members out there. A lot of our viewers don't
You're
like.
worse than a politician going on, not giving a straight answer. But here in the Daily Express, let me help you out. In the Daily Express, it says Marmite Rishi could lose by default to Penny. So a bit like you saying, down to the final two. It says, who would you most like to see win? And the public has said Rishi Sunak, actually, number 2, Penny Mordaunt, number 3, Liz Truss, number 4, Tom Tugendhat, and the last, Kemi Badenoch. And who would you least like to see? And they've got Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, in exactly the sort of the same way. So it is, people are confused. Not just you. You're all right, Darren. Everybody is. And again, this goes down to, do we know them well enough? And have they got the experience to go in straight away and run the country in these really tricky times?
Katie, what's caught your eye in the papers today?
Well, let's go from a contest full of hot air to potentially another. So it'll be no surprise to anyone that it's a touch hot. We've seen the leadership candidates give out ice lollies, some, you know, Rishi Sunak classic Chancellor water for anyone attending his leadership launch. But yes, we've got the meltdown, the front page of the Mirror, the meltdown. And what we're seeing is, you know, this hangover from the pandemic, where you're having the government nanny state giving advice as if sensible people can't, you know, regulate themselves when they're out in the sun. Although there'll always be someone who's, you know, downing a bottle of vodka or something, you know, outside with no sun cream on, etc. I think we need to get away from this state of alarmism and also trying to stop, you know, telling people how to live their lives. Most people are very sensible, and I think we should take the trust back to the people and stop with this nonsense. Although it did catch my eye that actually sales of rosé wine are going up because of the heat, not just fans.
So they're going to take advantage of the good weather.
Yes.
Simon Cole said drink more water. You're saying drink more rosé. Is that?
I would encourage all Britons to support our fantastic UK pubs.
And just throw an ice cube in to keep the temperature down.
Exactly.
Now, the story I wanted to highlight, which was interesting, that Tom Tugendhat highlighted this story as well when he was with us, which is on page 26 of the Daily Mail. Rochdale grooming gang ringleader gets prison equality role. You never know what's news and what's made up these days, to be honest, but the more unlikely it is, the more likely it is to be true. The vile ringleader of the notorious Rochdale child sex grooming gang has been appointed equalities representative as his maximum security jail. Now, the bit that gets me about this, and I hate the thing of soft prisons and everything, I mean, obviously, if there is a job, he shouldn't be getting it, I guess, in the prison. But why would any prisoner be appointed as an equalities representative at the prison? I mean, what is the point of it? I mean, why can't they just be prisoners and be locked up in the cells and told, you know, you're in there because you've done something wrong? Why are we giving them jobs like this? I don't...
Well,
what do you think, Katie?
I mean, obviously, we do want to reform anyone who's going to come back out into society, but equally, as someone from West Yorkshire, where some of these grooming gangs were operating and things were not done about this, local communities, especially in those red wall seats, will be rightfully angry that these prisoners are just being let off the hook and having a light time of it. Now, some people argue that deprivation of liberty is punishment in and of itself, but it's clearly not a deterrent and it's not the justice that the victims would be expecting. And the fact he's being given this equality role, well, I think given that the UN doles out their equality positions and women's rights, etc., to some very interesting candidates and countries, it doesn't surprise me. It's a very bizarre world we seem to be living in with very little common sense around these things.
I'm with you. Esther, what did you see?
Well, to be fair, I've been looking at the books this weekend, maybe something to read over the summer, and this is another one, Revenge. I thought I liked the title, Revenge by Tom Bower, and this is another royal family book. What went on, what the Queen said, supposedly. The Queen said, thank goodness Meghan is not coming, and that was obviously for the funeral of her late husband. And it's all about what happened, how are they trying to minimise the embarrassment between certain members of the family, how were they going to deal with Andrew, William and Harry, what were they going to do? Harry had his new Apple series coming out a few weeks later after the funeral, and that it sort of he sort of denounced the rest of the family, how they hadn't been supportive. So this seems a bit of a dishing the dirt book, something that I'll probably be reading over the summer, but not a good time, is it, for the royal family?
No, it's a really difficult time, isn't it? Clearly, obviously, the trouble with Prince Andrew continues to roll on. And there's talk about making a film out of that interview that Newsnight did, didn't they? I don't talk about Hugh Grant's going to play Prince Andrew. He'll probably try to run away from that from a mile away. But it is quite difficult in the sense that the Queen is stepping back from lots of her public roles at the moment. Prince Charles is taking a far greater role, but this is a monarchy in transition, and it's one where Prince William is increasingly obviously having to step up. But there are also big questions, not just about the monarchy's role here and whether it should be slimmed down in future, effectively focusing just on a much more kind of core group of members of the royal family, but also its future elsewhere in the world. And we know this. I was at the Commonwealth Summit in Rwanda a couple of weeks ago, where there are lots of Commonwealth leaders there, and some of those countries still have the Queen as head of state. There is a real sense, though, unfortunately, when she does move on, pass away, that they will start to question that role as well. So it is really fascinating. But the strange thing is that very much this is the world's royal family. We always think it's kind of the British royal family, which clearly it is. It's the world's royal family, as in the interest...
I thought you said the worst royal
family.
family.
The world's. The interest in Prince Harry and Meghan universally is extraordinary. It's extraordinary. This book will sell well, probably across the world.
Just quickly, I just want to say, page 8 and 9 of the Daily Mail, there's a cracking interview with Camilla. I love Camilla.
She's the real star of the royal family.
She is brilliant, and I think lots of people... She seems very down to earth and a really good sort. And she's put in here, in this interview, that she complains that families don't sit down any longer to dinner because I'm ancient, she says. In the old days, we all sat down. Now everyone is on their devices. People take those flipping phones with them to the table. You have to take them away from them. And I think lots of people in the country will be with Camilla about that. I think she's a breath of fresh air in the royal family.
Oh, well, thank you, Darren. Thank you, Katie. Fantastic having you on. See you both very soon. Now, all eyes are focused on the leadership race. Far less attention is being paid to the subject that matters the most to millions of people around the country.
According to the latest data from the Office for National Statistics, 1 in every 4 firms in the UK are planning to raise their prices further, and almost a quarter of firms have revealed a slump in trade over the past month as cost of living pressures continue to mount.
UK inflation increased to 9.1% in May and surging energy prices, and is expected to have risen even further in June when the latest readings are confirmed later this month. So, coming up now, have we got Julian? Julian is live. Here he is. So, look, this is the big subject of the moment. We've got the leadership race going on. We've got people talking about all different things, but everybody is saying they're not talking enough about the most devastating issue to hit the country, and that is inflation.
Well, I think that's right. Actually, I'm managing to be both optimistic here and pessimistic at the same time. Typical economist. I'm optimistic because the economy as a whole is actually holding up quite well, despite the cost of living squeeze and other headwinds on growth. And the labour market in particular is still strong. So it's a good time to be in work or looking for a new job. So there are some positives out there. A lot of people also still have quite substantial savings from the pandemic when they're unable to spend, and they'll be able to use that to support spending over the winter, even if their incomes are falling. So I think there are good reasons to be optimistic, but I'm also pessimistic because, of course, that's if you like, sort of average. That's the economy as a whole. And there's no doubt that there are plenty of people who are really struggling to pay their bills at the moment, to heat, or as it is today, cool their homes, and to pay their food bills. And I still think they at least will need a lot more support in the autumn when energy bills jump again.
And who's to blame for this surge in inflation, or what is to blame for the surge in inflation? Is it the government? Is it the lockdowns and coming out of lockdown? Is it the Bank of England? They're getting a lot of stick for not raising interest rates sooner. Who do you think is most responsible for this surge in inflation?
Well, first of all, of course, it's a global phenomenon, so I think you need to look for global explanations. Inflation is high everywhere. The inflation rates in the UK are similar to those in the rest of Europe or the United States. So it's nothing specifically British about this. It's certainly not due to Brexit, as some people suggest. I think there are basically three factors behind it. One is almost a good news story, which is that the world economy rebounded a lot more quickly than expected from the pandemic. So demand has been stronger than most people anticipated. The second point, though, is that we still have lots of problems on the supply side of the economy. So there's a shortage of workers everywhere. There's disruption to global supply chains because of the impact of COVID in China, and still lots of problems there. But the third factor, and I think the one that doesn't receive enough attention, is central banks. I think at the end of the day, it's the central bank's jobs to control inflation. They made a big mistake over the last few years of continuing to pump huge amounts of money into economies that are already overheating and keeping interest rates too low for too long. So if I did have to pick a single group of people to blame, it's central bankers. But central bankers in Europe and the US have made the same mistakes here as our own.
So how are we going to tackle it?
Well, I think there are two approaches. I mean, first of all, I think we should start by looking at monetary policy. I think the Bank of England needs to return interest rates towards more normal levels sooner rather than later, and to start to take back some of all the extra money it had been printing over the last few years. So I think tackling the overall level of inflation is primarily the responsibility of the central bank. The government's role is a bit different. I think the government's role is to protect the most vulnerable in society from higher inflation. And there, basically, I think it should be doing more of what it's already been doing. So these are targeted benefit payments to the most vulnerable households. And on top of that, lowering taxes further. To his credit, Rishi Sunak did at least start to unwind some of the mistakes that he's made. But I'm very much in the camp that believes that we need to cut taxes further, and the sooner the better, in order to ease the burden on households and businesses as well.
Julian Jessup, independent economist, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Coming up after the break, we're talking bananas and copyright with lawyer and broadcaster Andrew Eborn, so don't go anywhere.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. A fine weekend with plenty of sunshine ahead, but temperatures are rising, and early next week we're concerned about the extreme heat. Unprecedented temperatures are possible, bringing a real threat to people's health and infrastructure, hence why the Met Office have issued a red weather warning. High pressure is the reason why most of us are going to have a fine weekend. It's moving in across the UK. There are weather fronts further north, bringing a bit of patchy rain this morning to parts of northern Scotland. That'll spread across the Northern Isles, and some showers will move in across the Highlands and the Western Isles. But for most places, it's a dry day today with plenty of sunshine. Strong sunshine, however, but not especially warm. In fact, pleasant for most through the day today. Temperatures getting into the low 20s across northern Britain, mid to maybe high 20s further south. It's going to be a balmy summer's evening for much of England and Wales. We'll see more cloud for Northern Ireland and Scotland, and some showery rain trickling in here through this evening, and that'll last for much of the night across western Scotland. For England and Wales, though, it's a dry night, a clear night. It is getting warmer, however, so a bit warmer than the night just gone. Temperatures quite widely holding into the mid-teens, but temperatures are just going to tick up further. On Sunday, in the sunshine, we're likely to exceed 30 Celsius. A cloudy start, though, for Scotland. That rain slowly pushing away to the north, so the central belt will brighten up tomorrow. Plenty of sunshine developing for Northern Ireland, and more strong sunshine for England and Wales. And it's here, particularly over the heart of England, where temperatures are likely to, again, get over 30 Celsius. But rising also further north, again quite cool with some showery rain across the far north. Into the early part of next week, high pressure edges away. That allows hotter air to drift up from Spain and Portugal. That is why we're concerned about the temperatures potentially getting up to 40 Celsius in some locations on Tuesday. We have that Met Office extreme heat warning in force for Monday and Tuesday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
Welcome back. It's now 11:26 and we're joined in the studio to talk about some bizarre stories this week from the legal world. And it's with us, joining us is our friend of the show, Andrew Eborn. So come on, what is the legal lunacy that's
Well, I'll
been
tell you
going
what's
on?
been happening. Time flies like an arrow, but fruit flies like a banana. That's what Groucho Marx used to say. And it's all about bananas this particular week, because we have a couple of things. You might remember Maurizio Catalan was the chap who went to a Miami museum and duct taped a banana to the wall, and he sold that banana with duct tape for 120 grand. He realised it was so good, he did it again with another banana for another 120 grand, and did a third one for 150.
Were they real bananas?
They're real bananas. This is a real banana. I've done my version. This is a clip art, I think we'd call it. So you work on that sort of basis. But it turns out, he did this in 2019, another artist called Joe Morford had his own duct tape banana together with an orange in the year 2000. So he's now suing on that sort of basis, and we're looking at that sort of stuff, and it's going to be glorious. The dueling bananas is going to be thrilling, but I can tell you it raises questions about whether he actually copied it and so on and so forth. I will keep you updated about that. But what it does lead into, rather gloriously, fruit flies.
I can't get over somebody's paid £100,000 for a banana that's gone off in a week.
Fantastic. Well, I'll give you this one. When's your birthday? I can sort that out for you. You can have my version of it. It's going to be fantastic. What I love, though, about it, it also leads into the other bizarre stories of the week. Damien Hirst glorious chap attracting all sorts of publicities. It's been determined that flies have rights. Now, Damien, as you might remember, he does the dead shark in formaldehyde. He's got this one particular work which is called 100 Years, and it involves two cases. In one case, he's got maggots, and in the other case, they've got a sort of light, a UV light. So when the maggots hatch into flies, they fly to the other case, and they all die. And apparently there's been like 1 million things Damien has killed. And PETA, who do brilliant work about preserving animals' rights, they said, hang on, you can't do that. It's unfair. It's a breach of Germany's Animal Welfare Act, which outlaws killing or harming of animals without good reason. So what happens is they sort of turn around and say, he's been killing these flies unnecessarily, and they've closed it down. Isn't that glorious?
Haven't we all been killing flies for a long time?
You've got to watch
our fly spree.
Yeah, or the little...
Take you back to the shops or something.
Or the little swat.
It's the little swat, but this is, they make a wonderful noise. That it's very satisfying, but don't say things like that. It's got to be good. Well, the other thing that's also happened, because it ties in, it's all about that. The other question which is bothering the Californian courts is whether animals are entitled to the legal rights that humans have.
Well, flies have.
Flies haven't. We've worked that out in Germany. There are no flies in Germany. But the other thing they're asking about is about zoos. It's a really important case. And so what's happening, the organisation is basically saying the Non-Human Rights Project is what it's called. They're looking at whether or not elephants have a right to habeas corpus, which is the right not to be detained illegally. So they've now taken to a number of cases. There was a wonderful case in New York, which was rejected by the highest court, with an elephant called Happy, rather unfortunately. They've now started that case against the Fresno Chaffee Zoo, about 3 different elephants, saying that they are illegally imprisoned and they should be set free immediately. So that's coming to court in the next few days.
So in 1215 with Magna Carta and sort of 1679 with Habeas Corpus Act, do you think they had elephants in mind?
Well, it's totally irrelevant, I would have thought, but they probably didn't have it in mind.
McGee with the joke.
Thank you. It's got to be good. No, I think that's right. So what they're turning around, where do you stop? If animals, because they say, look, animals have feelings, which they certainly do, they look after their young, they mourn the dead, and so on and so forth. But where do you stop? If you take that logical side, then all domesticated animals should be set free. Your goldfish in your little pond, set that free. So you've got to work on that sort of basis.
Presumably this must just be a publicity stunt. They can't actually think that a court's going to decide.
Well, no, they are deadly serious about it. And they've got experts from around the world saying how bad it is for the elephant. And it is bad. They need to be properly looked after in big sort of enclosures and things like that. So there is that balance. Whether they have the right to habeas corpus is a different matter.
So when you let go of 3 elephants and you say, OK, out they go, well, I'm taking it they couldn't be put straight back into the wild. They wouldn't be used to it. So what are they going to...
Well, strolling down the high street, shopping at Sainsbury's.
Nelly the elephant off away somewhere. But I think there's is this really the start of getting rid of all, safari parks and zoos? Is this really the start of it to say you cannot have that anymore in a modern society? We want them all back in the wild. That was it. Because now all of your zoos have got to do so much for conservation. I mean, Chester Zoo, unbelievable.
Well,
and the whole thing is
circuses, haven't they?
But that's different. But the conservation work they do is linked into survival of the species, support of them. They're doing incredible work, and they're going to.
And they're absolutely right. So they're talking about a bigger enclosure. What they do is set them into a much larger space because that's what they need in the wild. And you're right. ZSL, the London Zoo, they do great works with tigers. For example, my mother. In her memory, we sponsored a special tiger enclosure for the great work that they do. But I think you're right. It does raise all sorts of interesting questions. And I love the creativity of habeas corpus. It's got to be brilliant.
Well, delighted you're with us again, Andrew, bringing these strange legal stories.
And it's time to split. As they say, it's time to split. It's got to be good.
Well, coming up on the show, we are joined by a representative from the rudest restaurant in the country. But before that, here are your latest news headlines with Tamsin.
Thank you, Esther. Good morning. It's 11:32. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The Cabinet Office is to chair an emergency Cobra meeting to discuss the impending heat wave. It's as the Met Office warns lives could be at risk as a new record temperature could be set in the UK next week, possibly reaching 40 degrees. It's issued its first red extreme heat warning, the highest alert for parts of England on Monday and Tuesday, whilst the UK Health Security Agency has declared a national emergency. The 5 remaining Conservative leader candidates have clashed over tax cuts and the economy in the first of 3 live television debates. Former Chancellor Rishi Sunak defended his economic policies, clashing with Foreign Secretary Liz Truss over what he called her fairy tale plans. Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch and International Trade Secretary Penny Mordaunt came to blows over trans issues, whilst Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Tom Tugendhat said trust in the Tory party has been collapsing. Sri Lanka's parliament has started the process of electing a new president following protests over an economic crisis. President Rajapaksa has resigned and fled to Singapore to escape protesters who stormed his home and offices. The Prime Minister of the country, who's also faced calls to resign, is standing in until a new president is elected, expected to be within a week. And in the Women's Euro 2022, the Lionesses will go into the last 8, having won their first 3 games without having conceded a single goal. England kicked Northern Ireland out of the competition last night, beating them 5-0 in the Group A match in Southampton. The team will face either Spain or Denmark in the quarter-finals. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. In a moment, it's back to Esther and Philip.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. Lots of you have been getting in touch today, and the weather has certainly been catching people.
Well, we love talking about the weather, don't we?
We certainly do. Go on, Esther.
So, Stuart says this country is well over the top when it comes to the weather. Half the world lives in hot climates, and they just get on with it.
Darryl says absolutely ridiculous woke nanny state rubbish. Strong start there, Darryl. Just seen that a Cobra meeting is going to take place. Maybe we should just let natural selection take its course. If people are too stupid to deal with a bit of sun, then maybe that's nature's way of telling us we have too many people. Gosh, I mean, that was
harsh.
That is a strong opinion, Darryl, to be fair.
Kenny is less harsh, but Kenny says 2 days of heat. Most people have seen these temperatures in foreign countries. We are not stupid. We know when it's hot, and it is just a couple of days.
But I should just say, Josephine has a different perspective. Josephine says, Esther and Philip, you are so wrong to make light of the expected heat wave. There are so many people with respiratory illnesses and other chronic illnesses who could be affected by the heat. Not everyone can jet away to air-conditioned hotels. Some live in and are confined by their health in cramped homes with no outside space. So, Keep your views coming in. We love reading your views. Now, we've all experienced below-par restaurant service in our lives, but our next guest represents a company which truly takes the biscuit.
Karen's Diner is a burger joint like no other, where staff are purposely rude to guests as they enjoy their meal and drinks in a surreal, interactive and absurd environment.
To tell us more about the Diner, which has just opened a branch in Manchester, is the restaurant's theatre manager, Paul Levin. Paul, I love this idea. Where did the idea come from to insult your customers?
Well, we started off insulting everybody throughout Australia. And when we felt that we were well on top of the situation upsetting Australia, we decided to bring the experience into the UK. And so we're now operating for some time in Sheffield. Manchester we've just opened, and Birmingham will be opening in Grand Central at the start of September. It's exciting.
What's the reaction of customers? Do they like it? Do they come back once they've been once?
Or do they come prepared?
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we've got a very high exposure on all the social media, so they do come prepared. But when they walk through the door, we do advise that the language will be somewhat strong and the service will be absolutely bloody awful. But that's part of the dining experience. The food is always good. The service is like any other good restaurant. The only difference is there isn't any service.
And how rude can people be? I mean, is there anything off limits, or can they literally do as they please?
No, we've got a very strong handbook system which we coach all the staff. They can't be abusive. Remember, our customers come to have fun, just forget everything for a night and have a damn good time. And they won't have a damn good time if they feel they're being abused. But what we do is give them, shall we say, the opposite of any restaurant service. And that in itself is extremely funny.
So it sounds to me like a cross between sort of Faulty Towers and Monty Python. So what's the sort of thing you'd say maybe when you're greeted on the way in, or if you ask for a bill? What happens?
Well, we have a greeter on the door, and the greeter will be saying to you something like, they'll keep a very straight face and say, well, and the customer will say, well, I've got a booking. And they'll say, well, that's exciting. We haven't heard that for 10 minutes. What else? They'll say, well, it's at 8 o'clock. Well, it's 10 to 8. So just go outside and have a walk around Manchester for 10 minutes. You're early. Have you not got a watch? It's all very slow. And as they sit down, menus will be gently thrown at them. And they'll say things like, do you have any cutlery? And we'll say, yes, we are a restaurant. And walk off. And when they say, but we need cutlery, we'll say, yeah, it's over there by the bar. And then continue walking off. The main essence is that we don't care.
But are you meant to feel like you're in some sort of hijinks drama? It's just a bit of a sort of a comedy sort of experience. Yes. I'm taking that a thumbs up. Fantastic. He did it. You know what that was? That is, and it's called Doing a Karen, and that's what it's about. Love it. That was Paul there, Paul Levin there.
It's terrific. It was, when you said about Faulty Towers and Monty Python, it's right, because, I mean, my favourite Monty Python sketch is when they pay for an argument, and they start off by going into the wrong room and he gets abuse. Yeah. And the fella says, no, this room's abuse. Arguments are next door. You've got to go next door. It's literally the same.
The other thing as well, I think some people, people are feeling so wound up, aren't they, with everything? I think it's a good way to let off some steam. Go prepared with your punchlines.
They haven't got one in Yorkshire yet. I reckon if they get one in Yorkshire, they will get as good as they get there.
Listen, they will in Manchester, where they have opened, and if they came to Liverpool, they would too. In fact, I say it true.
Liverpool would be a great place for it, because the banter
either way. So so that's it. We're banking on one. So now, anyway, finish chit-chatting there.
Sorry.
It's time to get our showbiz and sports news. In the studio, as always, we're joined by our regular showbiz correspondent, Hayley Palmer, and sports broadcaster Aidan McGee.
Should we start being abusive to these two?
Yeah,
Hang on.
Sounds like on it. Yeah, it's like, so what have you got for us today, Aidan?
Is that it? Is that all you've got?
No, listen.
Good as always. Heard it before.
I did go to the 40 Towers experience about 3 years ago, and it was fantastic. They put like plastic dentures in my soup and things like that. You know, they really wound me up, and I was wearing a jacket like this as well. So I mean, any food they spilt all over it, I'd end up not getting it out. But I did have an experience as well coming down from it was a little chef. It was called in Stamford on the A1, coming down from Newcastle, 2008.
No,
so no, they're not. They used to be called the Little Thief. They were so expensive. Anyway, I stopped, and I thought.
Actually genuinely
I know. Genuinely hang on, Aidan, can I tell you, you've let yourself down. You've let the station down with that joke. That was a joke.
Well, all right. Hang on, listen. I ordered this spaghetti bolognese, right, and it was £10.50 or something like that, a bit expensive. I thought, I'll have it because I'm pretty peckish. And I had it, and it turned up, and it was just like this tin stuff, microwave rubbish. And I said to the waitress, I said, this is absolutely horrible. And she goes, well, what did you expect? It's all horrible. That's it, that's true. That's absolutely true. Promise.
But anyway...
I used to love the little chefs.
Did you?
Yeah, don't they? On a little motorway
The Olympic breakfast. The Olympic breakfast.
Yeah. But far more interesting, if you don't mind, Hayley, is Dolly Parton.
Oh, I love this. This has actually made my whole entire week. She's bringing out a range called Doggy Parton.
Love it.
Because she loves dogs so much. And it's going to be clothing wear for dogs.
I'm loving it, and there's
the shop open 9 to 5.
Oh,
very.
I didn't miss that. That was your cue over there. I think it's a brilliant idea, and I would definitely be purchasing some items for my dog.
Yeah, there are going to be raincoats, there's going to be outfits, there's going to be dresses, there's going to be hair pieces. Just think a Dolly dog. It's going to be little Dolly outfits.
And we all love Dolly Parton. Who doesn't love Dolly?
And now, what she was going to do, I remember she was playing at Glastonbury, and she's a dog fan, and one got lost. This isn't a joke, it's not going anywhere. Sorry. I nearly went there. It's not a shaggy dog story. Oh, boom, I got one in.
That sounds a bit rough.
She was going to take it home and call it Glassy for Glastonbury, but they found the owner. So I'm just saying she is a dogs fan. Anyway, that was a shaggy dog story. Aidan, over to you. What's happening in the sport? Yeah.
England have just kicked off in the rugby down in Australia, looking There's 1 all in the series at the moment. They're looking to take it, and then Ireland won this morning in New Zealand by 10 points. So they made history, winning their first ever series against the All Blacks down in Wellington, rather. But talking on the theme of jokes, I don't know if you saw yesterday. Tiger Woods went to the 18th hole, and because he was on the Open, the old course in Scotland, he actually cried because he doesn't think he'll ever come back again. So look at this. Cry of the tiger.
Well, look, we will be coming back to some of your lousy jokes and some more lousy headlines, but elsewhere in the world, we've got those iconic Highland Games, and they're kicking off today with an array of regional sports and contests, including the world's strongest man. Well,
I didn't enter.
Well, GB News' Scotland reporter Davy Donaldson is in Venice following the events, and Davy joins us now. So, Davy, what's going on there as he's chatting away, not realising that we've joined him? Davy, come on, what's happening? That's not the world's strongest man with you.
No,
you're meant to be talking about that.
You're quite right there. Beautiful day in Inverness. I would like to say I'm joined by Glynis Sinclair, who is the chieftain of the Highland Games here in Inverness. So absolutely brilliant that it's back.
Yes, after a hiatus of 2 years due to the pandemic, we're back, and we've got a fantastic day for it today.
Including the world's strongest man. They were joking about that there, but we do have him here.
Yes, we have him and his very strong brother.
Yes, and obviously what they're going to be put on a demonstration, I understand?
I think they're going to do a demonstration of lifting the Atlas stones, which are absolutely massive. I think they've brought the crowds with them. There's already quite a lot of people here today.
Indeed, it'd be great to see, obviously, the world's strongest man and his brother as well. And not just that, plenty more to see.
Oh, yes. I mean, I didn't think it was going to be as big as this because we weren't 100% sure if we were going to go ahead with the Games this year, because with COVID, you're never exactly 100% sure if you can actually just go for it. But we just did, and it's a little bit toned down compared to what it was in 2019. But the crowds are coming in now, and it's just looking amazing.
Thank you very much. And we've got the day for it as well, I have to say. Beautiful weather here in Buck Park in Inverness. And at 5 o'clock, we've got the caber tossing as well. So very much looking forward to that.
Davey, thank you very much indeed. Enjoy the day. I've always fancied.
We'll be back at 5, hopefully, for the caber tossing.
The caber. I think that's a cracker. That is as a sport. I think I'm
Glasgow Rangers fan, the strongest man in the world. I can't remember his name, but he's definitely a Glasgow Rangers fan. I'll find out the name for you.
Really?
Yeah, I thought Davey might have told us.
You are a mine of useless information. Absolutely.
I know.
But the Kylie Minogue, Jason Donovan, Hayley, we're back in your element with this one.
Honestly, but it's going to be such a sad day because it's my birthday on the 29th of July and that's the day that Neighbours ends. And I don't know if I can cope because I have watched Neighbours for so long. Ever since I was a little girl, I'd come home from school, watch Neighbours, and it's ending. And I don't know why it's ending. I signed a petition to keep it.
I think there's tears welling up in your eyes. I'm shocked.
It ended in Australia a while ago because they film ahead of us. Yeah, but it was filmed on location on the outside shots anyway, and the interior shots were done in the studio. And here's some trivia for you: which British soap opera is the only one in the world to be filmed entirely on location, as in they film inside the properties and outside?
El Dorado.
No, that's not in the UK.
In the UK.
Go on, you should know. Come on, you're close to home, Esther. Think.
Brookside.
Exactly.
Brookside, yeah, you see.
Well, anyway, back to Neighbours, because I'm devastated about it, because how dare they take it off our screens?
I mean,
it's not okay, 37 years.
It's a big part of our youth. At university, I used to watch it at lunchtime.
Did you? And at night time?
Say
That's
the repeat.
The same as me, Phil. And then you kind of memorise the script.
There's always something different you saw in the second episode.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, it is a sad day. What is also a sad day is Ivana Trump dying.
That was so sad.
Age 73. But I think she had the phrase. I could be wrong. Aidan, I'm sure, will correct me if I'm wrong because he's our resident quiz champion. But I reckon that she had the phrase when she was getting divorced of saying, "Don't get angry, get everything," which I think is a cracking. Isn't that not a cracking? That is a cracking quote.
It is. She was a real character. But it was sad. Apparently, she fell down the stairs, which led to a cardiac arrest. She was planning to go to Saint-Tropez for a whole month and she was going to get her hair done. She was in, top form. So it was really sad. And also she lived with her 95-year-old mum and that really broke my heart because imagine how her mum must feel.
But she was not somebody to be trifled with. I remember when she found out Trump was having an affair, she went in front of him skiing and then right down the mountain she was shaking her finger as she was having an argument, going backwards down the snow. I thought, if you can do that, that is one heck of a woman. Any more sport from you, Aidan?
Yeah, interesting story. Phil and I touched on it off screen earlier on, but England have got a slight problem with players ahead of the World Cup in Qatar in November. They may have to leave a couple of players home who've not been vaccinated, and that's because players have to serve a 5-day quarantine period when they arrive in Qatar. Now, given the tightness of the schedule, it's not like a normal World Cup where you would appear in the country several weeks or a couple of weeks before to get training and get acclimatised and everything. This is different. England are playing 6 days after their arrival in Qatar, which means that a number of their players, and they haven't revealed any names here, maybe will have to quarantine for 5 days, and then Gareth Southgate's concern, according to Matt Hughes in the Daily Mail, who's a friend of mine, says that Gareth Southgate's concern is that these players won't have trained or had time to train with their teammates, so is it worth bringing them at all? The first game is against Iran on November the 21st, so it represents a little bit of a gamble. My own feeling is that game against Iran is not going to be a tough game, and I think it would be foolhardy to leave out your best players, whether or not they've had the vaccine.
Yeah, surely they can join in at the later parts of the tournament when the games get tougher, presuming England gets...
Well, they can, but then they've had this problem before because they've brought injured players to tournaments. They've not been ready for the first game. They never really quite got up to speed for the rest of the tournament. So he probably fears that could repeat itself here. And if it affects maybe half a dozen players, then you want to hide them to nothing because the games are not going to get easier, Phil. They get harder. You may start with Iran.
Why have we got this rule anyway? Why have we got this rule that they have to quarantine if they haven't had the vaccine? Where's all that come from?
That's a Qatar ruling. It's nothing to do with FIFA, but that's the rules of the country, and you have to fall into line. But this is, again, shows the lunacy of having a World Cup in the middle of a season. Everything's on a tight schedule. If we'd been having the World Cup now, it wouldn't be as much of a problem.
Will Smith, I was going to move over to you, Hayley. Will Smith?
Well, apparently he's been to India for some spiritual healing, and he says...
We'll all do with a bit of that.
He says that he's in a really good place now. But I think it's one of those things when when something happens like that, so dramatic.
What, the slap and all of this at the Oscars?
Yeah,
swearing, all kinds went on.
The whole world was talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a couple of months later, you're like, actually, it's calmed down. And he's obviously calmed down and just kind of gone, what happened there? So apparently he's in a really good place. He wants to move forward. I want to know, has he actually, text Chris Rock and said, are we friends?
Yeah. Or is that round 2 next year?
That's what I mean. We're living for this. So,
Will be doing the Oscars and Chris will come in from the audience and surprise him with something.
Exactly. What will happen next year? That's the question. But I know he's kept a low profile.
Why do you need spiritual healing to calm down?
Well, I know he's really good friends with Jay Shetty. Do you know Jay Shetty? He's like the inspirational coach. I think maybe he went over to him and, probably did...
Sounds like money for old rope to me, Hayley, to be perfectly honest.
But imagine how your head must be when the whole world's talking about you and how you're feeling. You must just want to escape, right?
Must you? I don't know. What do you?
Well...
I know I'm in a really great place at the moment, the GB newsroom.
I mean, I get abuse all the time, and I just,
take it.
It just doesn't, I don't seem the need to go for Indian spiritual healing or anything.
But I also think he's really got to do a bit of a PR campaign, hasn't he? Disaster, what were you doing? What were you thinking?
Yes.
How did that happen? And then you've got to say, how do I apologise? What do I do? I'll have to say I was having a breakdown, this, that, the other, and now I need to go for spiritual healing. It's part of a sort of a recovery plan.
I agree. But, I mean, I do like Will Smith. I mean, he's always been an icon to me, so maybe it was just a bit out of character. I don't know.
He can recover from this. There's always going to be a bit of backtracking, wasn't there? It's just normal celebrity behaviour. When you've had a little bit of a mishap, you sometimes have to claw things back in the eyes of the public.
By the way, I wanted to ask you about we've been doing a lot on the weather. I noticed that horse racing's been cancelled for Monday and Tuesday. Is there any other sport that's impacted?
If we're going to have a heat wave in sporting terms, it's probably a good time to have it. So England rugby are down in Australia, Ireland rugby are down in New Zealand, Wales are in South Africa. We've got there's no noticeable football at the moment. The Premier League clubs are back in pre-season training, but most of the big clubs have gone down to other areas of the world to do pre-season training. We've had the tennis, it's been and gone. There's no Olympics this year. The World Cup's not until later in the year, although that will be in sweltering temperatures itself. So at the moment, no, it's nothing. I mean, the golf, I suppose, would be one thing, the Open, but that's scheduled to finish tomorrow evening ahead of the really searing temperatures on Monday and Tuesday. So it could have been worse, Philip. Yeah, definitely.
You've missed one out. Bradford City are playing Sunderland in a pre-season on Tuesday.
On Tuesday?
On Tuesday.
They'll probably be hoping to have the night off so they don't have to play.
That'll be a 7:45 kick-off in the evening, surely.
Well, it could still be hot then, couldn't it?
Yeah, I'll be in Broadstairs. So.
Well, I mean, I just thought, it might be cancelled.
Yeah, well, we don't do cancel culture in this country.
Oh,
very good.
So Tom Jones could be our final story, so make it a big one.
Well, I'm a big fan of Tom Jones, and apparently he collapsed on stage. He's later denied this and said, actually, he just wasn't feeling good.
He was knocked over by a pair of knickers, was it?
It's not unusual.
Oh, that's the one. No, apparently he had viral laryngitis. He wasn't feeling good. He's since been back on stage. I looked on his Twitter yesterday. He's back. He was at Luxembourg yesterday performing, so he does seem good. I mean, he's 82 years old. He's a legend. The heat's probably got to him. And good on Tom Jones.
Oh, Hayley, Palmer, thank you very much. We'll see you next week. Aidan, thank you very much. We'll see you next week with some funny jokes.
I'm not banned.
That's it from us today. We'll be back at the same time next week. But now it's time for Alistair and Friends. Don't go away.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. A fine weekend with plenty of sunshine ahead. But temperatures are rising, and early next week we're concerned about the extreme heat. Unprecedented temperatures are possible, bringing a real threat to people's health and infrastructure, hence why the Met Office have issued a red weather warning. High pressure is the reason why most of us are going to have a fine weekend. It's moving in across the UK. There are weather fronts further north, bringing a bit of patchy rain this morning to parts of northern Scotland. That'll spread across the Northern Isles, and some showers will move in across the Highlands and the Western Isles. But for most places, it's a dry day today with plenty of sunshine. Strong sunshine, however, but not especially warm. In fact, pleasant for most through the day today. Temperatures getting into the low 20s across northern Britain, mid to maybe high 20s further south. It's going to be a balmy summer's evening for much of England and Wales. We'll see more cloud for Northern Ireland and Scotland, and some showery rain trickling in here through this evening, and that'll last for much of the night across western Scotland. For England and Wales, though, it's a dry night, a clear night. It is getting warmer, however, so a bit warmer than the night just gone. Temperatures quite widely holding into the mid-teens, but temperatures are just going to tick up further. On Sunday, in the sunshine, we're likely to exceed 30 Celsius. A cloudy start, though, for Scotland. That rain slowly pushing away to the north, so the central belt will brighten up tomorrow. Plenty of sunshine developing for Northern Ireland and more strong sunshine for England and Wales. And it's here, particularly over the heart of England, where temperatures are likely to, again, get over 30 Celsius. But rising also further north, again quite cool with some showery rain across the far north. Into the early part of next week, high pressure edges away. That allows hotter air to drift up from Spain and Portugal. That is why we're concerned about the temperatures, potentially getting up to 40 Celsius in some locations on Tuesday. We have that Met Office extreme heat warning in force for Monday and Tuesday.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little